The reason I'm making this video is that recently I shocked one of my clients. I recommended them a monolithic architecture rather than microservices. They were all excited about Docker and Service Fabric, and here I come with the bad news. I told them microservices architecture is not for you, and they were not happy. I did the research online, and most resources are focused on the technical side of microservices with minimal mention to the business consideration or value. Definitely, the business considerations are tightly related to the technical ones, but I thought of making a video especially for the business consideration. If you are a decision maker, such as a CTO, team lead, or an architect, and you want to assess moving to or starting a microservices project from the business point of view, then this episode is for you. Let me start with the intro. Before going into the business decision consideration, I want to start with a quick mention of the technical challenges of a microservices architecture. 1. Microservices Interdependency, which is planning an individual microservice, limiting its boundary, and resolving interdependency with other microservices. 2. Infrastructure microservices, like logging and emailing. They need to be designed and implemented by the same or a different team, and that requires more effort. 3. Security microservices. Your end user might be dealing with multiple microservices, and presumably they only need to authenticate once. You might need to explore topics such as OpenID Connect, OAuth, and other security protocols. 4. Enterprise Service Bus. While for a monolithic architecture, ESB is optional, depending on what you're doing, but for microservices, it is a must. 5. Database organization. You might need to split your database to suit your individual microservice and to reduce dependency. This is challenging per se. Add to that the complexity introduced by the European GDPR with topics such as backup and data shedding. 6. Source control. With microservices, your source control management strategy needs to be more evolved. You will have more trunks and more sophisticated branching. 7. Package management. Individual reusable components need to be packaged and versioned using a hosted package manager such as npm, NuGet, pip, or Maven. As you've already seen, the list of challenges goes on. In short, it is a challenging architecture. Now, what's your consideration as a decision maker? One, team count. Do you have a team that is less than 4 developers? Discounting any other factor, don't do microservices. This architecture is not meant for smaller teams. 2. Experience. Do you have the experienced team members who have done microservices before? Do you have a technical lead or an architect who is willing and, most important, free to do research and to be the final technical decision maker? Deciding about boundaries and interdependencies and other topics can be done by a committee, but there should be a final decision maker, as microservices structure is not forgiving. 3. Staffing. Given that microservices is trending and following the rule of supply and demand, you will be paying above average market rate for the technical staff that are familiar with this architecture. Obviously, they're worth the money, but check your budget first. 4. Startup. If you are a startup with a limited knowledge of your traffic load and not aware if you would reach the market and make it beyond the next 3 years, I want to emphasize that microservices is a long-term investment with higher upfront payments. Your monolithic architecture could be up and running and you would be having customers while the microservices equivalent is still being built. 5. DevOps culture. the culture of unit testing, integration testing, automation testing, continuous integration, continuous development, agile development, DDD, and more. If you don't have this culture already, then you might want to embrace this skill first, maybe by starting a monolithic architecture. As while software development is fragile, building a microservices architecture is even more fragile. 6. Scalability. With microservices, you have total control on what you want to scale. That's good. But the big question, do you have an idea what do you want to scale in advance? What if you went to the monolithic route and you immediately require scaling? For decades, we used to scale a monolithic architecture by replicating the whole monolith to another machine. And in the cloud today, you can increase the number of instances with just a few clicks. What I'm saying, if you go monolithic and suddenly the demand soars, you have a midterm solution while you transition into a microservices architecture. 7. Time to market. I assure you that building a monolithic project would take a fraction of the time and resources a microservices equivalent would take. You understand your organization and the definition of a successful project, and you could decide upon that one. 8. Taking the wrong decision. Let's say that you took the wrong decision and picked a monolithic approach. Down the line, you discovered after your public release that you should have gone with microservices. Well, this is an easy one. You are in the market now, and you are accumulating value. You can start splitting your monolith into microservices using an iterative release approach. After your monolith release, you created a team that worked on the monolith, worked with each other, trained as DevOps. They want to transition into microservices. This is even better. In summary, don't get me wrong. Given generous resources, I would opt in for microservices architecture. But usually, you get limited resources and unrealistic deadlines. Microservices and containerization are cool and trendy, but don't let that mask your judgment. For questions, or if you have additional business reasons, use the comment section. Most important, measure twice, cut once. Thank you.